Hi everyone, Andre here. Just want to recap Module 5 with everyone. Some really interesting readings this week. I'm going to start by talking about the SLA handout that discusses the critical period and various definitions of aptitude. So the critical period being that period prior to puberty where the left side of your brain that interprets language is not being redistributed. That's something that happens after puberty. And therefore you have a much higher reciprocity or ability to receive language learning. You're basically more capable of learning something in that critical period as opposed to outside of it, which is why adults particularly have a much more difficult time learning a new language. And aptitude is, at least in this context, defined as the ability to decode and remember sounds and then reproduce them. Whereas aptitude can be defined as something else in a different context. I really like that. There's two tests with which we measure aptitude: the Pimsleur Language Applied Battery Test and the Modern Language Aptitude. I found those to be really fascinating, that we actually measure language learning aptitude. I've never taken one of those, but I would like to. They're very interesting. I also didn't know that there were 3 types of smartness. I know that Gardner has 7 different kinds of intelligence, but the 3 kinds of smartness are comparative, contextual, and experiential. Experiential meaning that you can think creatively outside of the box. Compositional meaning more like analytical, so to speak, where you could take things from a very literal context and analyze them in that way. And contextual was defined as street smart. I think, thinking outside of street smart, contextual would be more the ability to apply some knowledge that you have from one area to another and use it across various modalities. I don't think it's important, by the way, that we give the Myers-Briggs exam to students, but I think it's really important to analyze them and know their strengths, weaknesses, what areas they feel strong in and what areas they feel weak in, so you can reinforce them. For those who do want to know, I'm an INTJ. I just took the test. I thought it was really interesting. Mastermind personality. Not tooting my own horn. I don't really believe that, but whatever. And then Tabor and Ada Campoy kind of worked with each other this week in the context of activities that can apply to productive language use and the way that we interpret speech. So Tabor tries to talk about telegraphic and formulaic speech. To me, telegraphic was more about the what's, who's, and whys. So what is this? Who is that? Why is this way? That's students using questions to understand things and analyze them in an in-depth kind of way, whereas formulaic speech is just the repetition of something you've heard in a certain context. I immediately thought of bad words because that's what most people learn in different languages, are the bad words, and they kind of repeat them and try to use them in different ways. But going back to the children, the case study spoke about these 2 students that were communicating with the same phrases, uh-oh, okay, and look it. So there's a very minimal use of language, and not much of it is inquisitive. So I feel like it should be inquisitive for them to develop a more productive language use, which was the kind of the conclusion of Tabor's article, that says that we always have to analyze language. Always when we're speaking and learning it, it must be analyzed in depth, and it can't just be like a separated. I'm just going to say this because I've known it or I've heard it before. It should always be, making a connection with yourself. So the Ada Campoy activities made a lot of sense after reading Tabor's article. For example, the I Spy theatrical ABCs. So that's a telegraphic use of language. What is this? What is that hanging on the wall? How do I say this? And then making an image or acting out the idea that you want to learn. For example, like the alphabet, A is for apple, B is for boy, C is for cat, D is for dog, and drawing out those things. So not only are you just regurgitating information that you've learned, you're actually applying it to something that you've seen and that you know in your own mother language. I also thought it was interesting that you could use the same application for counting and perhaps other areas for the students. So I thought that was really interesting, and I'm really curious to see what y'all think about formulaic and telegraphic speech. Do you think that different intelligences require different approaches to language. Should we be teaching one way or another way depending on how students think? Should we have separate English classrooms? Let me rephrase that. Should we have English classrooms that are specifically based on the level of language speaking for the student, or the similar intelligence? It's just an interesting concept that I was thinking about, and I'd love to hear what everyone else thought about it. So take care. Y'all have a great week. Thank you so much.